today. We have also set up a subsidiary called the Northeast Venture Company. One of the areas we encourage startup is in the area of healthcare. We already, though we started last year in the month of April, we've assisted so far 3 companies in the healthcare sectors. So this is all I have to say, and thank you very much.
Can I now request Mr. Edwin to make his presentation?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for organizer to invite me and our institution to share our views and our updates on the recent development of infrastructure development in Indonesia, and perhaps it is also the arena for us to promote PPPs, or PPP investment opportunity in Indonesia. Because since the appointment of our President Jokowi in 2014, it seems to me that our government is pushing very hard to accelerate infrastructure development in our country. First of all, I would like to maybe provide you with the update that Indonesia is catching up with the infrastructure development to improve the quality of infrastructure, so that according to the National Planning Agency, we plan to spend or to invest in approximate number of US $363 billion in the upcoming 5 years, starting from 2014 to 2019, and primarily is to catch up with the needs for improving our electricity, road, and transportation infrastructure in the country. And we are fully aware that maybe sourcing from the government budget is not sufficient to be catching up with this huge requirement for infrastructure investment, so that in our planning, private investment is planned to contribute 37% of total investment required, on top of a traditional government budget, whether it is from central and local government, which previously become main source of financing for the infrastructure in Indonesia. As you may be aware also, Indonesia is moving right now towards a country which is much more decentralized than previous, so that we can delegate the development of infrastructure into the state or regional development level. I think in order to achieve the huge target of investment, of course, fiscal support is essential to attract private investment or private investor to come to our country. For that reason, I think Ministry of Finance has introduced series of support in the past 5 years, starting from the creation of viability gap funding. The VGF is basically the kind of capital subsidy provided by the government in order to increase the IRR of the PPP projects. And it has been applied to a couple of PPP water projects in Indonesia. Maybe I can share with you the updates. The second one is a project development facility, which tackles the project preparation of the PPP infrastructure projects. It is basically a grant provided by the MOF, and SMI, our company, PT SMI, is one of the main user of this PDF facility, so that we can prepare a better PPP project prior to the tender process of the PPP itself. Project supported by this facility, I think we mentioned in the slide presentation, covers from the water project, fiber optic, telco project, and public hospital, as well as maybe the recent one is LRT projects. The third one is a guarantee because of the nature of the infrastructure project, long-term concession period, so it requires a certainty on the political side, on the political risk side. For that reason, the government has formed IIGF, which tackles, which cover a guarantee on the public side, and it has been applied to a couple of projects, as mentioned in the previous in the presentation. Also, the availability payment, which is basically the commitment of the government or MOF to make available the sum of money periodically for the payment of the or the installment of the PPP project itself, to make certain the IRR of the PPP project. For that reason, I think it has been applied to fiber optic telco network PPPs in Indonesia. And last thing is with regard to the land acquisition, where I think it's quite important for the PPP project to go ahead with the availability of land being acquired, so that the investor facing limited uncertainty with regard to the land acquisition. And starting from 2016, I think we have, as our institution has prepared some project that has been achieved financial close, I think amounting to an approximate number of 5 projects, an approximate number of $3.7 billion equivalent, and the upcoming PPP project also have been queuing on our pipelines with a variety sectors from water supply, transport, hospital, as well as toll road. And in Indonesia, as for your information, maybe the toll road is the most sophisticated PPP sectors that has produced a significant, I think, investors, whether it is coming from local, whether it is SOE or a consortium of private investors, and also I think some foreign has been trying to become bidders to our Trans-Java network PPP toll road. And I think in the past few years, it has been tendered out to the market a total length of 500 kilometer toll road with a project cost amounting to close to $6 billion. Aside from the PPP, I think the government also pushing SOE to develop an infrastructure, especially if you know Sumatra Island. Sumatra is the second most populous island in Indonesia after Java. Sumatra is very close to Malaysia, and Sumatra is relatively, in terms of density, is relatively low compared to Java. So we are trying to build a Trans-Sumatra toll road project by way of assigning SOE to build a 3,000 kilometer length toll road. And for that reason, SMI provide a very long tenor financing terms, 25 years with 10 years of grace period, so that we hope that this toll route can be developed and be starting to commence operational, maybe starting this year and next year down the road. Airport facilities also, the government has appointed SOE, Angkasa Pura 1 and 2, to develop or rehabilitate the existing airport and to encourage the SOE to collaborate with private, whether it is local or international players. Urban transport, I think the same story happened. Port and railway also something that SOE has been the major player of the infrastructure in Indonesia for quite some time. For this occasion, maybe I would like to share our recent financial closing of PPP Umbulan. It is a water transmission pipe PPPs. Water to me is quite a difficult PPP because we have to deal with local government, whereby the capacity of the off-takers is very important for the success of the PPPs. For that, I think this water, basically the transmission pipe water is basically connecting the spring, I call it water from heaven, to Surabaya, Greater Surabaya. Surabaya is the second largest city after Jakarta in Indonesia. So 120 kilometer length of water pipe is connecting water from spring and distributed into Greater Surabaya. Interesting about this PPP is that we introduces the VGF, viability gap funding, amounting to approximate 50% of the total capital expenditure, and also concession period is 25 years, and we prepare the project quite sometimes, 5 years, and finally we achieve financial closing, and expectedly the project will start commencing their operation 2020. So we are pushing very hard. SMI act as a lender also in this PPP project to make success of this project, to make it happen so that water can be more available to the society and bring a better quality of life to the society. In this project structure, I think we have to deal with 5 local government under the East Java province. So I think that we involve the element of VGF, as I mentioned before, and also we involve the element of government guarantee through Indonesia Guarantee Fund, IIGF. And fortunately, we have started draw down our money, and hopefully we can be completing this project according to the schedule, so that the difficult water PPP has been started, and we hope that it can be replicated to other water sectors in Indonesia. I think lesson learned from the difficult water PPP is that the importance of off-takers, I think that is the most important one. Without having a good off-takers in terms of local government-owned utility company that has a credit worthy, it is quite difficult to make success on the PPP upstream. The second thing also, land acquisition. It is a common, I think, risk factors in Indonesia. I think the availability of land acquisition upfront will bring a better, more probability of success of the PPP. So that I think land acquisition is important thing. The third one is project preparation. We in SMI has been supported by MOF and ADB as well as World Bank in assisting the local government to be working in tandem with us in preparing the project. So that 5 years period of the project preparation seems to me too long for the next PPP project. So we have to be better manage this project preparation to make it a shorter period of project preparation. I think 4, 5, and 6 is basically the standard documentation, financing scheme, and the stakeholder management that we need to improve from day to day in order to achieve financial closing. I think SMI itself is infrastructure finance company. We were established in 2009, and we have been in operation 9 years. So we built under 3 pillars. Direct investment, direct finance is basically dealing with long-term finance, which is essential for the infrastructure development. And consultancy services and project development deals basically with the PPP. So we are a PPP agency. We promote PPP to attract private investment in the country. And aside from that, we also been assigned by the government 2015 to develop a municipal debt finance. So at the end of the day, we are a catalytic role in, we play a catalytic role in infrastructure development in Indonesia, and hope for the best that Indonesia can attract more private investment to the country to accelerate infrastructure development. Thank you for the opportunity.
May I now request Mr. Balgan to make his presentation? In the interest of time, I will request him to be brief.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank ADFIAP organizing this event, and also I'd like to thank IDBI Bank Limited, Exim Bank of India, National Bank of Agriculture and Rural Development, Entrepreneurship Development Institute of India, National Housing Bank, and Northeastern Development Finance Corporation hosting this event. Let me briefly introduce about my institution, and then also some of the infrastructure projects we are undertaking in our country. We are the only policy bank in Mongolia who was established 7 years ago to undertake all the infrastructure projects, and as well as export project and other projects that could effectively help us, our economy, to grow to its potential. At the last few years, we had a lot of changes. One of the biggest changes has been made is that we have had to update our legislation, which is that result from the last couple of years. Our institution has been sometimes filling the role of the fiscal agent to undertake a lot of fiscal projects. This briefly key milestones for our institution. We are the only institution that was able to finance the big infrastructure projects, including road network, electricity, and also a lot of infrastructure projects in our country. Let me give you an example of one of the successful projects in our country. With the help of the government and also other institutions, including the institution of National Bank here, we were able to upgrade one of our key infrastructure projects, which is Central Heating Plant number 4 in our country. The country is huge, and there is a lot of concentration in our urbanization is in our capital city, which is almost more than half of our population living in the city. And then we had to depend a lot on the heating plants during the winter time to heat all these housing units and also all the citizens. We did have choice. One is that building completely new one. Second is upgrading the existing one. The old power plant was built in 1987, which is almost 30 years old, and we've been able to upgrade its capacity with the help of the updated technology from the manufacturer. Total cost was $70 million, and with the help of that, we've been able to update 8 boilers and 6 turbine generators. This is one of the key projects because it supplies about 70% of our central electric system and 65% of heat demand of the capital city. There's a lot of benefit from this project. Mainly it's that improvement of the sufficiency and reliability of the electrical and heating supply, and also reduction of air pollution in the country, in the capital city. With the upgrade of this power plant, we were able to introduce new technology, and we were able to increase employment, and also we were able to expand our available construction area within the capital city. Also, it was one of the experience for the large-scale projects, and economically it also decreased our electricity import for the country. We had a lot of challenges, and namely the FX risk, loan repayment risk, macroeconomic uncertainty, and political risk. And with the FX risk is that this project was financed from the foreign loan, but revenue generated in the local currency. With the help of that asset and liability management within our bank, we were able to mitigate FX risk, effectively dealing with the central bank and also with the project implementation unit, that we were able to hedge some of our FX incomes in upcoming years. The loan repayment, with that we had agreement with the government that in case of the loan repayment problem with the project implementation unit, the government must take over this project. As a result of this transfer, we were able to get the government security on this project. The macroeconomic uncertainty is that the overall economic situation in our country deteriorated in the period between 2014 and 2016. The government of Mongolia reached to international institutions like World Bank and International Monetary Fund, and we were able to secure extended fund facility program with the International Monetary Fund in 2017. And with that program, we were able to grow economy back to normal rate of economic growth. 6 years ago, our economic growth was like in double digits, but during this brief period from 2014 to 2016, it fell all the way to close to zero. But now the country is back on track, and last year we were able to grow economy like 4%, and it is expected to grow all the way to 6% within this year. The political instability is that we have on average 2 years of government effective time with a lot of changes within the government. But we were able to revise a law on the Development Bank of Mongolia, and which was approved in the 2017. And with that, we were able to strengthen our independence from the government as well as parliament. So with that, we were able to mitigate all this political instability risk within the country. This is end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks to all panel members. We have about 10-12 minutes left. So we will have some quick round of questions. My first question is to Mr. Sergey. Mr. Sergey, you mentioned that the Russian government has built one high-speed highway from Moscow to Petersburg, and that's roughly about 400 odd kilometers highway. A part of it has already become operational, and the balance will become operational going forward. Typically, in any of these Asian countries, building such a long high-speed highway would have taken a lot of time for the purpose of land acquisition. I don't know how this problem was overcome in your country.
Well, actually, I'm not sure that I understood the question.
The highway which has been built, going up to Petersburg.
Yes, it's not yet built.
No, it's not yet built, but
yes.
I think a part of it is already
part of it is already
operational, and the part
yes,
will
yes,
be
yes.
completed
Of course,
going forward.
you see, we have very traditional scheme of highway construction because the highway is divided into pieces, which are built by different contractors, and thus there is master plan, and contracts are awarded separately. There are auctions where these pieces of construction are auctioned. Thus, different constructors are building different pieces of highway. Of course, we need. I would say that I talked about the fact that unfortunately, started to resolve this problem when it arose. We needed this highway 10 years ago, approximately. It's long overdue. Yes, but technically, it's much the same like in other countries.
As Mr. Edwin mentioned in his presentation, that one of the lessons learned is about the land acquisition. So typically in Asian countries, land acquisition for construction of these roads, that takes a lot of time.
Yes. Well, see, it's not a very big problem for the highway between Moscow and Petersburg because Russia is a very sparsely populated country. We don't have big problems here, but we had big problems in the city. When the toll road in the city was built, you need to have a lot of negotiations with landowners and some enterprises to get access to this land. That was really a big problem, and partly you need to remove some owners, remove enterprises from the way where it goes. Biggest problem is in the cities. When you build highways in the cities, it's a big problem, but not as big. It's not as big in rural areas.
Okay. So coming to Mr. Paul, I think you mentioned that NEDFI has done a lot of work in healthcare, or hospitality, or tourism, etc. But do you find that private investment is flowing into this northeastern region, or is it solely left for NEDFI to develop this?
In the last 10 years, I think there has been a lot of investment from the private sector, more so because of the incentive which is given by the government. And as I mentioned, 10% of the budget allocation is there, which is like this year, 48,000 crores has been allocated, which will be about 7.4 billion this year. So that is a huge investment by the government. So the infrastructure is improving. There is also subsidy up to 30% of the investment in plant and machinery. This has brought investment, but it has slowed down a bit right now. We hope it will continue in the future.
And going by the hilly terrain of this particular northeastern region, probably there is a need for having more of a transport infrastructure in that particular region.
That's right. The physical infrastructure is also required because most of this Act East policy of the government. This is the region which connects India to the Southeast Asian countries. There has been a lot of work done there. I think in the last few years, we have seen many of the states have been well connected first by rail, then by road. I think we are having road now through some of the neighboring countries. I think this development has happened mostly in the last 5 to 10 years.
I have next question for Mr. Edwin. So Edwin, actually you rightly pointed out the role played by PTSMI in developing the infrastructure of Indonesia. And you gave an elaborate account of what are the different activities PTSMI has been undertaking, right from the stage of project viability preparation till the financing, the viability gap funding, the availability financing, etc., giving of guarantees, etc. But you feel that, what are the lessons learned actually? Because you have gone through the entire cycle. So what are the critical lessons learned? one of the point which I just noticed is that there is something like the Infrastructure Project Acceleration Committee, which basically sees that what are the bottlenecks in implementation of these projects and tries to see and have the coordination between the various stakeholders to bring it on the same platform. So you feel that such type of committees should be emulated in all the other countries, which will help them to really speed up this infrastructure development?
I think the importance of the committee, because maybe as you are aware, Indonesia is in transition from centralized nation to decentralized nation. Maybe you remember our previous famous President Suharto is governing the country in very centralistic way. All that is decided by the central government can be done easily. But now we are moving into a more democratic country. So we have to deal not only from central to local government, but also to the political party. That's why, for that reason, the establishment of the coordinating, infrastructure investment steering committee is important to speed up, to try to solve the bottlenecking and to persuade, because we can no longer be imposing a dictatorial. That's why the importance of the team is very, very crucial in speeding up the infrastructure development in the country.
Good. Mr. Balgan, coming to you. I think in your brief presentation you mentioned about the central heating plant, which the capacity was enhanced. So did the government evaluate the socio-economic benefit of these plants before at the planning stage itself? I mean, how did it go about it?
Yes, government does that. Usually that the government looks at the long-term plan, and then they have a lot of projects list, and then they have to go to feasibility studies, and then they will decide which one is high priority, which one is middle priority, and then they will decide that let's start for project ABC within the given time frame.
I think given the time what we have, I would like to just sum up. Basically, all of us will appreciate that the need for rapid infrastructure development can hardly be overemphasized, whichever be the country, whether the developed country or the developing country. But it is important that to ensure that both public as also private financing happens in this particular space, it is necessary that adequate balancing of risk is maintained by all the among all the stakeholders, so that each one of the stakeholder has got an incentive to make that investment. Well, the experience of each of these countries would be different, but the underlying theme remains the same, that if we have to have inclusive economic growth of a particular country, there is no imperative than making investment in the infrastructure sector. And all the necessary government agencies will have to see that these development financial institutions or the national development banks continue their focus on infrastructure development, and adequate incentives are given to all the private players also to come in with their investment for the furtherance of the respective economies. I think with that, probably we can conclude this particular session on infrastructure finance. Thank you.
Thank you, session moderator, for your deliberations and leading the discussions for this pertinent session. And thank you to each one of our speakers for sharing their expertise and experience with us on perspective of their respective organizations. Before we conclude, if we can just quickly, to the tradition of presenting the mementos, starting with our session moderator, Mr. Yadvadkar. And now to our speakers.